Hey, what is going on, everybody? This is Beanie and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be doing another tutorial, specifically another pitching tutorial. In my last pitching tutorial I kind of talked about more of the mechanical side of analog pitching and how to do it consistently and things like that. In this video we're going to be talking more about the mental side of pitching and how you should approach your opponent and how to find exploits in your opponent's game and how to use those exploits to get him out consistently. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. But before we do, please leave a like on the video after you watch the video, because if you left a like right now, that'd kind of be a lie, right? And lying is wrong. Don't lie. So watch the video, and if you like the video, then leave a like, because don't lie. Okay, the chess match. This is the most important thing to do at the beginning of the game. It's to figure out what your opponent struggles with, what your opponent is really good at, if he's good at anything at all. And your goal in the first inning or two, maybe even three, the only thing that you should really be trying to do other than getting your opponent out is to acquire information about your opponent. So you should kind of have a mental checklist in your head going on, like, okay, what do I need to find out about my opponent early on in the game? There are a few things. One, the most important thing probably is to figure out whether or not your opponent is disciplined, whether he swings at strikes, whether he, or swings at balls, whether he watches balls and is very patient, things like that. And if you throw a pitch in the zone, is he willing to watch it if he doesn't think he can't hit it, or is he going to swing at every pitch in the zone? These are the questions that you need to answer early on. Another question that you need to answer is, how good is your opponent at timing pitches? Are they early on a lot of off-speed pitches? Are they always late on fastballs? It's typically called having a slow bat or having a quick bat. Do they have a quick bat? But I think it's also important to know is how good can they wait back on off-speed pitches? Are they always really early on off-speed pitches? Do off-speed pitches buckle them where they're late? Because that happens for a lot of people too. When they see a curveball, it kind of freaks them out, and they end up swinging a little bit late. So along with how disciplined they are, you also need to figure out how quick they are in recognizing pitches and swinging the bat. And then the final thing that you need to answer about your opponent in the first few innings is, what locations in the zone do they struggle with? Can they really hit inside pitches? Like, can they really turn on inside pitches? Or do they, they may have a slower bat and they hit pitches on the outside half of the plate a little bit better? Do they struggle with high or low? So, just kind of experiment with those things. Throw some high pitches, throw some low pitches. If you end up giving a run, figuring out all this information, that, it's not ideal, but it's okay in the long run, because, if you throw a high and inside fastball and he turns on it, then that gives you a lot of information. One, that tells you that he has a quick bat. Two, it tells you that he can hit fastballs. Three, it tells you that high and inside is kind of like his sweet spot, and you might not want to throw it there all that often. And, and maybe he's really disciplined. Maybe he wasn't swinging at the other pitches that you were throwing out of the zone. So you're like, okay, all right, I know how to pitch this guy moving forward, so you're not going to give up that many runs in innings 4 through 9. And generally, you can figure out what type of hitter your opponent is by the second or third inning. And sometimes it can be even sooner than that. And I've kind of gone ahead and categorized a few varieties of different types of hitters. I think you'll see these guys very often in Battle Royale. And sometimes in ranked seasons at the lower levels, you'll get a nice little variety of different types of hitters and stuff. Usually the guys at the top are all kind of similar. They're all very patient until you throw them a strike, in which they're really aggressive and they murder the ball every single time, that type of hitter. But yeah, I've gone ahead and broken all these hitters down into a variety of different categories just so that you know what you're dealing with. The first category is the chaser. you guys all know about this type of opponent, right? You start a BR game, and what's the first thing you do in the BR game? Because you have a crappy starting pitcher in there, you throw probably like a curveball or a changeup in the dirt. And the only reason you do that is to see if your opponent will swing at it. And a lot of opponents, especially early in a BR run, will swing at it. And that kind of tells you, okay, this guy's not going to be that disciplined. But there's a difference between being undisciplined and just being an unadulterated chaser. There are some guys in the game where you can just throw them ball after ball after ball and just keep throwing it in the dirt, and they will never lay off of it. They will just continue to chase and chase and chase and chase. And then if eventually they adjust and they stop swinging at it, you can just throw a fastball, up and in or something, and they're not going to be expecting it. You can strike them out. It's the easiest type of opponent in the world to pitch to. So if you get a guy like that, you probably don't need to work that hard. You probably don't even have to think about it that much. Just keep throwing pitches out of the zone, let them swing at it, and then if they eventually stop, just start throwing them strikes, and they won't know what the hell to do. They're just bad players. The next type of opponent is what I like to call a gunner. And a gunner is a guy that is kind of undisciplined, but he has a really quick bat. So, and he's not as undisciplined as a chaser. So this guy is a little tougher to pitch to, but there are still ways to exploit him, right? So the type of hitter that I'm talking about is the guy that will come up and you throw the changeup in the dirt and he does swing at it. But the next changeup that you throw, he's kind of expecting you to throw the ball in the dirt, so he doesn't swing at it. And then you're like, okay, he's not swinging at it, and then you throw a fastball, low and in or something, and he absolutely destroys that pitch. And that's because this guy is, every single pitch, he's thinking that he's going to get a fastball up and in, and he's swinging like he's getting a fastball up and in. So if you give him a fastball in the inside corner, it's probably going to get hit hard because his whole timing mechanism is based off the fastball. And the reason why he's undisciplined is because when you're throwing him that pitch, when you're throwing a pitch to him he sometimes just can't help himself, because in his mind he's thinking he's getting a fastball on the inside corner. So if you give him a pitch that kind of looks like a fastball on the inside corner, he has to immediately snap off and try to swing, but he swings through it because it's actually a changeup in the dirt or something. So he's a tough kind of hitter to pitch to, but there are definitely some exploits in his game. It's just really a nice mix of off-speed stuff in the zone and off-speed stuff out of the zone, mixed in with the occasional fastball maybe out of the zone to exploit that guy and get him out. The next type of hitter is the Votto Light. There are two types of Vottos, the Votto and the Votto Light. The Votto Light is a guy that's extremely patient, and these guys can be very tough to pitch to because they don't chase much at all. But then you start to realize that they've kind of sacrificed timing for the sake of patience, and that's not always something that you want to do. So once you realize that and you start throwing them sinkers on the inside corner of the plate and they end up flaring it out to right field for an out every time, you're like, okay, this guy is patient, he has a good approach, but his bat is just too slow. And, a guy like that, once you figure it out, he may be tough. It may be tough going early on because you're like, man, I don't want to pitch to this guy. He's really patient. He might be really good. But then you start to figure out that his bat is just really slow. And, and at that point, it becomes kind of an easy game. But then you have the straight up Votto. And the Votto is the guy that is very, very patient, but he also kind of has a quick bat. These guys are hell to deal with because I think they're a step below the top type of hitter that I'm going to talk about, but they're really difficult to pitch to because you just have no go-to pitches to get them to strike out. They're going to put the ball in play almost every single time, and it can be extremely frustrating because sometimes they're going to have hits that fall and stuff like that, and they're going to hit home runs. And basically what you want to do with a guy like this is accept that you're probably going to give up a run or two at least, but just pitch them in the zone. Try to have like a reliever or maybe a starting pitcher that has like a sinker or cutter, because sometimes those guys will struggle a little bit more with moving fastballs, more so than a four seam. Just kind of pitch backwards. Rely on that changeup a good bit. Try to throw the slider and the curveball. Spot it well in the zone. That's the thing about the Votto light hitters, is that if you spot really well, you can really get by without having too much damage done. But if you don't spot, if you leave anything hanging like I just did there, it's going to get hit pretty hard most of the time. So very tough type of hitter to pitch to, but not impossible. And then you have another type of hitter that is very easy to pitch to, and that is, I like to call them Davidsons. That's based off of Braxton Davidson. He is a prospect in the Atlanta Braves system who is kind of notorious for being a very talented hitter, but he is just way too patient at the plate, and it leads to him getting ridiculously high walk and strikeout numbers. And, that's never something that you want. The high walk numbers are good, but he strikes out way too much. He doesn't make hardly any contact at all. Very strange type of hitter. And this isn't a guy that you're going to run into very often on MLB The Show, but there are some guys who will just be so patient that they'll have an 0-2 count on them immediately, and then they'll just be like, okay, well, he's probably going to throw a ball here, so I'm not going to swing. They just convince themselves that you're trying to throw them balls all the time. And sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not, but generally it's not the best approach, and, it's a pretty rare thing to see. And this probably isn't something that you're going to have to concern yourself with too much. They're very easy to pitch to when you find them. I just thought I'd mention them. And then you have the Rebels. I call these guys the Rebels, obviously after pitching Rebel. And guys like this, they're both patient and extremely aggressive at the same time. And what I mean by that is that if you throw them a ball, they're never going to swing at it, or hardly ever going to swing at it unless it's a really, really good pitch. But if it's a pitch in the zone, it doesn't matter where it is, that ball's getting hit hard. And these guys, I don't have that much advice for you. I just don't. There's not a lot you can do other than just outscoring them. They're going to get their runs. You're going to give up a minimum of 5 to 6 runs in a game like that against Pitching Rebel, against Cardinal Bird, against McGunsky, against a variety of different top players. There are some really, really great players in this game. And, in a game like that, you've just got to rely on your bat to get you through, because you're going to have to score some runs to win it. And the best thing that you can do is just minimize the damage by using all the tips that I've covered in this video, in my previous video. And then also, if you guys want to, just a quick side note here, I will leave a link to last year's pitching tutorial in the description down below if you want to check that out. I think that it has some pretty good insight that I might not get into in this video. So if you guys want to check that out, links in the description. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is changing speeds and how you should optimally change speeds against your opponent. Wow, that guy just hit an 0-2 sinker out of here. But changing speeds and how you should do it to its best effect. And really, it's pretty simple. You just want to look at what your opponent is doing from a timing perspective, and just kind of let that guide what your next pitch is going to be. So let's say you throw a sinker and he's really early on it and he pulls it foul, or something like that. The next pitch that you're going to throw is probably going to want to be an off-speed pitch, because he's kind of locked into that sinker, right? So maybe not even an off-speed pitch. Maybe you throw the sinker. Maybe you have Kluber up there and you want to throw the cutter, which is a good bit slower than his sinker. His cutter is like 89 and his sinker is probably in the upper 90s. So you want to do this number right here, throw that cutter on the outside corner to get him to kind of swing through it. But mostly you want to throw all-speed stuff if they're early on pitches like that. If they're late on the sinker, maybe you just want to pound that sinker over and over again until they prove that they can hit it. You know, and then if you throw an off speed and they're late on the off speed, they're probably going to be late on the fastball as well. You can throw that. And if they're early on the off speed, maybe you want to throw an off speed pitch out of the zone. You know, maybe you don't want to give them a fastball to speed their bat up for them, you know, with the off speed stuff. So yeah, just use what your opponent is doing. Now, like I said, there are going to be some times where you just have a god opponent that's going to have just early or good timing on every single pitch. And those guys are tough to deal with, but generally, you can have a pretty good idea of what to throw next just based off of what your opponent is doing from a timing standpoint. Also, another thing to keep in mind, that if your opponent does have a quick bat on inside fastballs, another way to get them to maybe you know, not hit the ball as effectively is to throw a fastball, but to throw it on the outside corner, because they're gearing up to pull the ball. If you throw it on the outside corner, if you can locate it there, then they're going to kind of roll over it. And you'll get a nice little easy ground ball to the shortstop or to the second baseman. That happens a lot too. Now, there are some guys who can pull fastballs like crazy and then hang back on the outside fastball and go the other way with it. But that's pretty rare. It's, you know, I mean, that's your upper echelon type of players. And most of the time when you give them that outside fastball, they're going to roll over it. So yeah, just keep that in mind as well. And the final thing that I'm going to talk about is tunneling pitches. This is probably overall the most important thing that I'll talk about in this whole video, because tunneling pitches is the key to a lot of success. And my God, what is my defense doing? But it's the key. It's the key. It's tunneling pitches. And what do I mean by tunneling pitches? What I mean by that is basically making two different pitches look the same for most of the ball's flight. So let's say I'm going to throw well, Kluber doesn't really have that many great pitches for tunneling, but let's just say I throw a sinker right here. You see how that looked like? I mean, it looked like a four-seamer for a good bit of the play, and then it kind of turned into a sinker about 3/4 of the way through. Now, if I throw a cutter and I start it in a similar spot, it's going to look a lot like a four-seam fastball or a sinker for most of the flight, and then it's going to turn into a different pitch. You can do the same thing with a fastball and a curveball. Do that and then start. I mean, I definitely don't recommend doing this. I'm just doing this for illustration purposes. If you throw the fastball up there and then start the curveball up there, it kind of looks like the same pitch until the very last moment, and that can be a very deceptive technique. Fastballs and changeups do great in this type of strategy. So right there, I just struck that guy out, but right there you saw the low and end fastball. Then you throw the low and end changeup, and it looks very, very similar, but it's a different pitch with different timing. It's going to be very difficult for your opponent to make that adjustment. Now I throw the outside fastball right here. Okay, I didn't get that where I wanted it. I wanted it off the plate about right here. But if I would have done that and then I would have thrown the cutter, I almost got that cutter right there. It looks like the same pitch to your opponent, but it's doing different things. And that's the whole idea behind tunneling. It's to deceive your opponent into thinking you're throwing the same pitch when in reality you're doing something different. And that's basically the essence of it. Now, there are some pitches that tunnel really well together. And when I said that Kluber doesn't have very many pitches that tunnel well together, it's because he doesn't have the right combo. But he does have some that tunnel okay, mostly fastballs, but his off-speed doesn't really play that well off of it, in my opinion. But some pitches that tunnel well together, you have a fastball and a straight changeup like Kluber has. He has that one. Then you have a cutter and a slider. You have a sinker and a circle change. You have fastballs and cutters. You have curveballs and sliders. You have cutters and sliders. You have fastballs and sinkers. And then you think of a guy that, to me, this guy is like the number one example of a dude that you want to tunnel with. And that is Dellin Betances, right? He has that insanely fast four-seam fastball that he throws on the inside corner that you try to catch up to, right? And then he has that devastating slurve that slurve that looks like a fastball for like 90% of the pitch, and then all of a sudden it breaks 10 feet to the left or to the right, and you just don't know what to do with it, right? I mean, that's generally how it goes with Dellin Betances, is that you throw the fastball on the inside corner. Kind of, I'll try to kind of do it with Kluber here. You'll throw it like right here with Betances. You'll throw that pitch, and then Kluber doesn't have a slurve; he has a curveball. But you throw that, and then you just break them off with that slurve. You start it right there. They think it's a fastball, and then just bloop, it just drops down, and you strike out. That's the general idea of tunneling pitches. And one of the most important things when tunneling pitches is to start the pitch in the same location. Doesn't mean they're going to end in the same location, because if you start like a slider right here, it's going to end up over here. If you start a fastball right here, then it's going to end up right there, right? So yeah, you want to start them in the same spot, but you don't want them to finish in the same spot. And if you do this consistently, this will really end up improving your pitch sequencing, and your opponent really, they may have somewhat of an idea of what's coming because you tend to tunnel pitches a lot, but they're not really going to pick up on your entire game plan, because tunneling isn't something that you're going to do on every single pitch, but it is going to be something that you do often enough for your opponent to have to think about it and make adjustments to you. So yeah, guys, that is going to do it for this pitching tutorial. Like I said, I will have a link in the description to the video that I did beforehand on analog pitching, and the video I did last year covering similar things, but I think there are some insights in that video that I didn't go over here, specifically how to use specific pitches. Like I go through fastballs, changeups, curveballs, and things like that, and maybe where you want to spot them, how often you want to use them, against what type of handedness, and things like that. So check that out if you're interested. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and now would be a good time to leave a like on the video. So yeah, I love you guys. I will see you guys later, but until then, peace.